like learn an opening or get better at it, I'll oftentimes go back and look at a master game to try to improve at that opening and stuff. So this to me should be a way to get ideas both as black and white of how to play. So in this case, I'm looking at it from the black side currently, how to play against the Catalan here. We can also note certain things that are happening in the position. Like when grandmasters play, unlike a beginner, they're much less likely to resolve pawn captures. Like white didn't take on d5, black next turn not likely to take on c4. And the idea is they want their opponent to spend the time and energy with their pawns on these captures, which will then pull their pieces forward. So you might say, well, that doesn't pull any of the white pieces forward, but it does give this bishop some life. So in a way, it's getting squares, right? And the idea of squares, activity, controlling the center and being able to play e4, that is going to be valued in some of these games much more so than the actual material value itself. And of course, we've come to learn from computers that this is a very good way to play, as long as you're not giving everything away. The time, right? The time that's spent moving a pawn twice, once to move it, once to capture. And then notice too that on this recapture, this bishop comes to life. So both players understand that like captures are going to maybe help the other player's pieces. So anyway, after d4 gets played here, we've got d5 to c4. Okay, so he does actually take. And if white wanted the pawn back immediately, they would have a queen check and they'd be able to take this pawn. One of the reasons I mentioned this check is that it's a very dangerous check in the game of chess in general, and it's something you should always be looking for. Whenever a c-pawn of your opponent has moved, you should be thinking about the idea that the queen can come out with check and maybe take something over here, like a bishop or a knight, right? And I see this in many lower-rated players' games where they maybe lose track of a piece, they go in for an early attack, maybe this pawn's still on d7, and then a check comes and it's like, oh, well, I mean, it wouldn't be a check if the pawn's on d7, but that type of idea where somehow the bishop can't help out. Maybe a pawn's on e6 like it is right now and the knight gets lost, right? So definitely be aware of that idea. I don't necessarily think we're going to see that here, but we do. We do see that move here. Interesting. Oh, and I got a follow there, but it looks horrible. Let me fix that too. Trying this out for the first time, and I'm already seeing that my screens are not designed for this, so let's bring that back. Thank you so much for joining the Fortuna Chess Club. Hopefully you enjoy being here, and hopefully we all grow and learn together and, have a good time, I guess. All right, yeah, so actually that move I was talking about gets played. Queen to a4 check. And now black should be very careful, right? Because moves like knight to c6 don't really handle fully the problem. Although you can offer this knight here, so it's a little bit confusing, I guess, just to share this with you, because it's like, on the one hand, as a coach, I'm like, well, don't give away a pawn, but, you could somewhat consider it here, just for the idea of activity again, and the idea of getting this bishop. So if the bishop was to take, to make this pawn move, to have the queen take with check, the bishop on c8 would go to d7, the queen would guard the rook, and you're not actually going to win material. Like, you'll win the pawn, but you're not going to win like a rook or anything. And this will be weak. Like, this will be weak later on, and white would then maybe have some trouble with the king finding safety, because you'd have this wonderful light square bishop, lots of squares for it, partly because this pawn moved. So actually knight to c6 could be played, but like, I would say almost no one would play that. Well, it's weird to say it that way, because there are lines in the Catalan where you do play that into a knight and bishop, but here I'm saying I would find it very unique if someone was playing it that way. All right. Knight to b8 to d7. Okay, yeah, so like a little bit safer, right? Not putting it on the bishop. And then maybe leaving this bishop here to help guard b7, right? Because you always wonder, like, well, why wouldn't you want to threaten the queen? And it's like, well, she's going to take a pawn anyway, and then you're kind of leaving this guy under attack. And it's also not clear that the bishop's going to be great on, d7. Maybe it wants to come to c6, which I guess it could have. And again, this is played in 1953, so the lines might have changed. In fact, today you might actually even see this move with the idea of queen takes and then bishop c6. Theory does change over time, and a computer might also like that as well. Notice I have the computer off, though. There's no... Well, I guess you guys can't really see if I have it on or off, but my goal is to just, not have the engine telling us what to do, I guess, and just following the pureness of the game and enjoying each game for itself. Okay, knight g8, 1 to f3. So I like this. White's not in a hurry to grab this pawn, which is interesting. Because a knight, oh, he can't move because he's pinned. I see. He plays c6 or something first. All right, so a7, a6, preparing b5 to hold the pawn. And now the queen takes on c4. But that's what that's another thing grandmasters are gonna do. They aren't just gonna like grab pieces for the sake of grabbing them. They're gonna say, hey, on this move, can they do anything to hold that pawn? If not, they're gonna go ahead and take the extra development, right? And focus on castling. So yeah, black's position's a little bit more cramped. The bishops are kind of looking off into either nothing or just not that active. But look at this bishop, nice long diagonal. This bishop able to come out, maybe pin the knight. And of course, when we talk about ideas of pinning a knight, we're thinking about weakening the light squares in this case. It's not really about the knight himself, it's usually about another square. Whenever your opponent plays a bishop out to like pin a knight or attack it, don't just think about the knight, but think about the squares that he and pawns defend. So often, just that counting principle, right? You lose track of the fact that maybe this guy's not guarding something anymore, and then you're like, oh, I'm losing a pawn now because I can't take back. I didn't even think about how that bishop was holding me in, right? Okay, so a7, a6, queen takes. And then this move looks a little wild, right? You haven't castled yet, but in order to play this move, black realizes next move, Cam, you're going to play bishop to b7 and cover up that diagonal because, of course, this could be a bit scary with the bishop coming to life, right? So the queen's under attack. She's not able to use this. I guess maybe here would be possible, right? I would think maybe there would be a move, but then rook over and bishop here is probably what black's plan is. Yep, and now remember, this is 1953, so she goes right in. She goes right in, pins the knight, stays on the active diagonal, and I'm gonna guess that rook got played to b8 here. You could go up, but I feel like then you'd be under like bishop e3 would even come to mind, right? With the idea of hitting the rook maybe, or other moves, maybe with h3 first. That's the thing too. So many moves in chess have like a responsibility level with them. What's up, DM? How you doing, man? So like if I want to play bishop to e3 to attack this rook on a7, should it go there? I understand that like knight to b4 is like a legit threat. Like threatens to damage my pawn structure. The pawn on e3 will be very, very weak. Another knight can kind of like hop back in the game and have access to that square. Pushing the pawn doesn't seem to really fix the issue there once that bishop's gone. So like another piece like the king or somebody would have to guard that, or the queen would have to drop back. It's just one of those things like where you want to look after your pawn. So in order to play bishop h3, I'm almost always playing bishop to e3. I'm always playing h3 first to keep the knight off of my bishop. And you'll see this in a lot of games, like in the Perk defense and other openings. And you guys might have even seen it in my own games. You're like, wow, Fortuna just played h6. Why is he playing h6? Well, as black, I'm doing it because I want to be able to play a bishop to e6 occasionally, or I need this knight to be guarding d5, right? Like we talked about a minute ago. Anyway, queen threatens the rook, and let's see here. Yeah, rook a to b8, exactly like I said. And the idea is the rook's a little bit less harassable here, right? Now, if the pawn had gone to c5, well, yeah, this bishop would come out and hit the rook. That's not pleasant, but the pawn's back here, so the rook's a little bit safe, right? And actually, that move I just mentioned, you can kind of look at that and say, that could be a threat here. C7 looks kind of weak, and maybe black's not in the best position to guard that right now, especially with this knight being pinned. Bishop d6 doesn't really answer it because a bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. So, yeah, exactly the move played, bishop to c4, f4, and that's kind of what I like doing about it's going good, Roberts, how you doing, man? But this is kind of what I like about the game. So instead of just blindly playing through the moves in the book, I'm actually thinking about what would I do in the position, and then I get rewarded here. I say I would play bishop to f4, then I see bishop to f4, and I go, yeah, I saw that weakness. I see the ideas of that move. And what you're doing when you do that type of thing is you play through these master games, is you're actually in a way almost yourself playing the game. Even if you really want to make it fun, you could even try giving yourself so many minutes per move, try to make it like a real tournament. You'd be like, well, my tournaments usually have an hour and a half to play. Maybe I'll give myself an hour and a half to play through the game. And just each time I think about a move, I'll just start my clock again. Their clock may or may not run out as you're playing through it, but just start the clock again. Make the other move, start the clock, right? So that way you're keeping track of how long it's taking you. And you could also then write down the time that you're spending on each move. Now, this is an advanced tournament idea that many, many strong players do because they want to get the max benefit of their time. So actually, while playing a tournament, they'll write down the time used on different moves, what the remaining time is on the clock. And that way, afterwards, especially when it relates to blunders or mistakes, they can go back and say, well, geez, I made this blunder. How long did I spend thinking about that move? Oh yeah, I spent 30 seconds. Well, I've really been thinking a lot during my opponent's turn about something I wanted to do, and I made the move really, really quickly because of the time I spent thinking that I'd solved the problem on the board. And when they made their move, I didn't see it at first, but there was actually this really subtle idea that completely refuted the idea that I had. And then you can use that and go, okay, so no matter how excited I am to make a move in a tournament game, I'm not gonna move in 30 seconds. I'm gonna take more time. I'm gonna go back, maybe spend 2, 3, 4 minutes, and then after that, whatever that time is that you want to allot for yourself, then I'm gonna make the move. And you might find too that those opening moves that we all wanna race through, because we played so many blitz games, you wanna race through the opening. In an over-the-board tournament game, those opening moves can either cause your opponent some challenge in the opening, through you thinking of like challenging moves, things that are going to make them actually solve some problems, or they can be played in a way that doesn't give you an opportunity in those moves to gain an advantage. Because you're not playing the most challenging moves, and maybe they're just kind of able to like hang with you into the middle game. And if they happen to be a very strong middle game, end game player, well, you've almost in a way helped them get to where they wanted to be anyway. So there's a lot that goes on with chess, and it's never something that should be easy or played quickly. I know you guys have watched me play quickly a lot on stream. I feel like the internet adds another element, and I'm always playing games that are relatively fast. Like even a 15 plus 15 classical time control is still relatively fast in terms of the way the game of chess is played. So playing fast in those guys, I do realize that I'm going to be hurting them on the clock. Okay, so knight f6 to d5. And this, black finds a way to guard it, right? So we were looking at the board, we're like, how are we going to guard this pawn? And black actually solves that problem, right? And goes here, protects the pawn, and almost more importantly, attacks the bishop at the same time. If the bishop was back here on g3, then white could just play a move like knight to c3 to, maybe try to disrupt this knight's placement, or I guess they could also play e4, those types of things, right? Just to kick the knight and then on with my attack. Here, that won't work. If you kick the knight's going to take the bishop, so that's not solving the problem, right? So now as white, you could think about things like castling, or like I said, knight c3, getting another piece into play. Now remember, this knight can't join him in defense, so knight c3 could again basically ask black, okay, you said you solved the problem of this pawn, but have you, right? So I would actually be tempted to play knight to c3 here. Let's see, it goes out there. Oh, sorry, they can't play it yet because the bishop. I mentioned the bishop thing. Gotta move that guy. To g5, huh? Yeah. This is actually, if you guys have followed my chess games at all, and you guys watch the way I play, there are very, very, very few games where I venture my c. If you guys watch my bishop, and you guys watch where I've put my bishop, d2, e3, b2, a3, these are things I've tended to do, right? And part of it is exactly what's happening right here. Bishop to f4 was met with knight to d5, hit the bishop, moves to g5, about to get hit again by something else. That's like 1, 2, 3, or 3, however it's gonna happen. It's gonna be like three bishop moves. That's a lot of time. So black may actually have gotten a bit in the lead in development, but then, white had the lead in development maybe, but then as they begin to spend multiple times on the same piece, in a more critical line, they almost lose the opportunity to have the attacker advantage they wanted. So as a word of caution to you guys, if you're gonna move your queen's bishop, I would say in general, you'd wanna move that after you've castled. You'd wanna move that with the idea of like winning a piece or attacking something. Now, yeah, that's what they did, but because of the move knight d5, I would almost say maybe not the best move, because you're literally playing into something where they get to put the knight on a great square, and at the same time, dislodge your bishop to move again, apparently. So that, to me, it's like you didn't, not the best things have happened there. That's all I'd say about that, I guess. I don't like moving the pieces in the opening more than once. Every time you do it, you're just basically letting your opponent, it almost changes the color that you're playing. You think about it like white has the advantage of one single move. One single move is all white gets, right? And you just moved a piece again. Well, now you're practically black. You practically changed the game. Now, the black knight's also moved twice, but the knight is on a square where it's likely to remain or to have more threats. Like knight to b4, threatening the queen, threatening c2. Like, maybe it helps out with the c5 thrust because of its movement and attacking the queen. Like, there's good things happening there. But this bishop's gonna have to find a home after this move. So bishop to b5, or bishop g5 rather, and then yeah, to e7. So again, saying yeah, go ahead, develop me kind of thing. Yep, and then the bishop took, like I said, what might happen, and the queen takes. Okay, so with this queen capture, they're basically like, I want to preserve the knight here, and they're also recognizing that the knight is guarding the rook on b8. So they're pretty much anticipating pawn to e4, knight to b4, and they're basically saying, go ahead, take this pawn. I don't care about that pawn. I care about development and time, much in the spirit of like a Paul Morphy or something, right? And also maybe keeping their king in the center, because after that pawn moves to make the knight move, the d3 square becomes horribly weak, and the knight will be able to check there, dislodging the king, possibly winning the b pawn. So they're saying, hey, go ahead, come on in, kick the knight, take the pawn. I'm gonna have this check, you know. But they're thinking about those things, and that's exciting. And yeah, and as Rhino mentions, there might be an intermezzo as well. So intermezzos are moves that can be played between the move. All right, so he takes there. White then castles. So white, notice too the responsibility that white took there. It might be extremely tempting to go into this, like, you know, take pawn line, but the white side of the board says, you know what? I don't think this is a good idea. I see that my king might not be able to castle. I may, after this move, not even be able to take the pawn. I might have to come back and cover d3. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to castle, and then I can proceed with my normal attack. And I can't tell you how many players have lost games, even, you know, people I've worked with or friends, where they get that idea of like, I can make one more move before I castle. Like, I definitely recommend, guys, that you don't look for that one more move before you castle. In fact, almost looking at the game the opposite way is going to help you improve a whole lot. If you say things like, I'm going to castle as soon as there's no immediate threat to win one of my pieces. As, you know what I mean? Like, look at it that way. Like, can I castle right now, as opposed to, can I wait to castle? Because you wait to castle and you may not be castling, and you might be waiting to play another game in the next round of the tournament because you tried to survive without castling in a, you know, over the board tournament game where people can really put their mind to the game. And that's something else you guys have to realize here. Like, this isn't like your blitz stuff we see today. These guys are spending, you know, and they don't show the time in the book, but I'm sure they're spending, you know, 5, 10, 15 minutes or more on a move at times, really thinking about like the best way, you know what I mean? So like, it's much different than even the way we're analyzing it right now. I'm going a little bit quickly through it. Okay, so yeah, more time. So far I would say black has done an excellent job in this game of getting extra time on pieces, you know, 1, 2, 3. Then we had the queen, which was like 1, 2, 3, and now it's going to be a 4th time. So that's 7 moves with 2 pieces. When you move the same pieces that many times, you literally become the other side of the board. I feel like black is doing very well here. Whether or not they win the game, they're doing well at this moment. C6 all the way back to C2. So now she moves again. So again, if you're keeping track, it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's 4 moves by the queen, and she still hasn't found a square where she won't be harassed in the future. Notice the knight could attack her. We might see a rook coming to C8 and attacking her in the future. So I don't feel like they've really, and it's not really clear what she's attacking either. Maybe helping out with H7, but there's no bishop to help that knight fly in. So it's going to take like a pawn move, and even then H6, you know, so like even the thing you're trying to attack isn't exactly accessible right now. Although maybe a little bit of pressure on the C file, but they can actually play C5 into this. Probably after castling though. And that's another thing I should tell you guys too. Don't look for pawn breaks before you castle too often. You know, there's some situations where that type of stuff can work out for you, but in general, you're not going to want to disrupt the center before you put your king to safety. Always, you know, think about that stuff. All right, C7, yeah. And of course they do it. I love it. I say these things. I talk about the pawn break. It's available right now, and I don't know if it's like based on the time that it is or based on maybe some study this guy did, but he plays it right now. He plays C7, C5. If I was working with a newer student, I would say, yes, it's working for the Grandmaster, but man, they really thought about this move. Like, in general, I don't want you doing this kind of thing before you've castled. Anyway, so C7, C5, and then pawn takes, because, well, this makes sense. White wants black to do anything that's not castling. So you see, like, you make that move, well, now you got to spend time recapturing, right, with something. And then the time lost there maybe gives white an opportunity for something. Maybe not here, but in general it could, right? Okay, so knight takes. And rook F1 to C1. So now they put pressure on the knight. We can kind of see this pace of play, right? So it's like black goes for activity, but now they find themselves like having to respond to attack, you know, keep responding instead of doing the move that we said we could do a minute ago. Okay, knight goes back probably. Rook, better, rook here. So yeah, rook with the discovery looming, but the discovery isn't so great because the queen seems to guard all of the knight's forward squares. So if you're gonna do a discovery going forward, the queen is likely to be able to take you. Although this rook might have problems, right? So maybe the knight came out next or moved here, but they need the knight to get developed. Let's see what they did. To C3, yep. It's probably gonna get kicked around a little bit, but all right. Knight D to F6. What? Okay, so they actually brought the knight back now. Not wanting to exchange and wanting to keep That's actually nice, but do they have control of e4? They do. They do have control of e4. Yeah, so if I'm going to make a move like that, I'd be looking at... Yeah, I didn't really invite you to the study. I mean, I love your advice and stuff, but I just kind of wanted to go through this, Rhino, and I know in the past it's taken you a little while to get where you want to be with things. But yeah, so I was just kind of looking at this in terms of like, are we stopping this move when we play the knight back? And absolutely. So that's why Black played this move more so than wanting to keep the knights on the board. They want to stop e4. You have 1, 2, 3 guys working against e4. Additionally, you kind of freeze the knight. If the knight was to move anywhere, this bishop taking that bishop is very, very good for Black. The weakened squares around the king can help out with mating ideas and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I've never gotten a chance to do this before, Rhino, and it would be cool in the future to get you guys in here, like, analyzing with me and stuff, or if you have your own notes, that'd be kind of fun. I just got this book this last year. I'm super excited to go through these games. I've wanted to go over this for, like, months now, and I just haven't found the time. With the other books I'm currently looking at, it just wasn't working out for me, I guess. But I'm kind of talking you guys through my understanding of the position and why I'm trying to actually figure out, like, why are they making these moves? You know, not just racing my way through the game and saying like, oh, this was played and this was played and this was played. And it's so easy, guys, to watch a master game of chess and to be like, oh, I could have found all those moves. Well, yeah, because they were spoon fed to you. If I put it on a spoon and I shove it in your mouth, you're probably gonna get it, you know. But if you're sitting at the board in a tournament game and you have to find the right move, it's a lot harder. Like even that c5 move before castling, like definitely have to think about those kind of things. All right, back at f6. And then, so when would I not want to play this move? I'll tell you one thing, if Black had a bishop here, like a dark square bishop, I would not want to play this move. But with Black's dark square bishop being gone, yeah, did I not, is that, you guys see that, right? It's a study, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's a study. Maybe I should go here. It's a study! Really, really big. It's a study! We're trying anyway. But anyway, yeah, so that's a study, yeah. Good to see you, Gull. I'm just teasing, man. Gull's a really good friend, that's why I'm giving him a hard time. All right, back through this. So, apparently one of these layers is open. All right, so we're in this game. B4 gets played. But like I'm trying to say to you guys, when you're creating weak squares on the board, think about the square that you're creating that's weak, and think about the number of your opponent's pieces that can use or hurt you on those squares. If they have a dark square bishop, this move is a lot more consequential than if they don't. So the fact that Black's dark square bishop is now gone makes that move a little bit easier to be played, because you're not worried about the access to those squares of that bishop in the future. All right, goes to a4. Oh, okay, that makes sense, because the pin, right? Utilizing the pin. At first I was like, that just looks really bad, you know? But it's not bad because there's a pin on the queen, or sorry, on the knight to the queen. And so that'll probably lead to the queen moving somewhere, like d2 or, you know, maybe even b3. She wants to basically get out of the way of the rook capturing and then losing material, right? And there's no minor piece, right? There's no bishop to come out and help. There's no like magical rook goes to b3. So it looks like it's probably gonna be queen to b3. And I'm not choosing this side, mostly because there's another rook that's gonna enter the game on d8. And when that rook enters the game, I'd like to not have my queen have to move again. Again, the time thing, right? She's less harassable. Well, she could be less harassable here, depending on what happens, I guess. Obviously, the bishop could find its way here as well. But yeah, but Black's done a good job so far. I mean, if you look at the board, it almost looks like the black side of the board is like the white side of the board in terms of how much development there is. And that goes back to what we saw. Queen to a4, queen to c4, queen to c6, queen to c2, 4 moves. Bishop, oh sorry, and the bishop went to f4, went to g5, went to e7. 7 moves by 2 pieces, way too many. I think it's gonna be consequential in the game here. So, yep, so queen goes to b3, like I mentioned, and then rook c1 to c3. What? Oh, okay. So Black does it kind of a cute way. They just want to force exchanges, basically. They could capture with the knight, but they decided to do it in a more cute way with this rook takes instead. Yeah, so rook c1. Wait a minute, what? Knight c3. Hold on. Queen goes to b3. Make sure I'm getting this right. Oh, they actually castle. That's what I'm not getting. Okay, so they castle here. It's like that kind of looks weird. All right, rook a to c1. What? What the heck? Did I mess up a move in the game? Oh, okay. The rook did capture on c3. Okay, so they did do that. Sorry, that actually did happen. This and then this, and then castle. That's what happened. Okay, I'm with it now. I was like, how did I miss that? Yeah, and then rook a to c1. Sorry, I looked it down, and a lot of times I get my finger on the move as I go through a book as well. But all right, yeah, and then rook of f8 to d8. So yeah, they're playing, for open files. Obviously, they can't remain on the file. If we just have everything trade right now, the bishop ends up on c8. And it's kind of looking more drawish, although I think we're going to see a decisive game here. a2 to a3. More support there. Knight to f6 to d5. Now the knight comes back. Interesting. I'm wondering about this move in particular, like why the knight's coming back. I really liked having control of e4 myself, but maybe just wanting to get the exchanges going on c8. I'm not really sure. Very dangerous. Okay, so I'm just kind of reading a little bit here, but yeah, all right. Seems reasonable, I guess. Queen c3 to d4. What? Queen c3. What the heck happened? This book is killing me, guys. Oh, the queen took on c3. Oh my gosh. I gotta slow down. I just gotta slow down. Sorry, guys. That doesn't make sense, though. Oh, there was all the trades happened. This one extra trade happened that I missed. Now it makes more sense. All right. Sorry about that. Castles. Rook a to c1. He missed a couple moves there, and then rook to f8 to d8, like I said. a2 to a3. All right. But this is a little bit different game than what I was thinking, and maybe that explains the knight to d5 a little better too. I want to establish the knight on c5. Knight on c5. All right. Anyway. Then the queen goes to d4, so that makes sense. She's able to go there now. And she probably wishes this guy was already here to make it like a real threat versus and you guys might wonder too, like, why is white moving into a discovery? Well, they aren't moving into a discovery. They're looking at the idea that if the knight goes forward, it's always the forward movement, right? Anywhere that it goes, the queen will be able to capture that knight. So that's why they're doing it that way. No rush here. All right, let's take our time. This next move, if Ben Feingold was here, he'd be upset at our player. F7 to f6 was played next. So looking to expand, with e5, but we hardly ever want to see this. Hey, how you doing? Thank you for the follow. Give a shout out here. And thank you and welcome to the stream. We're just going over a game here played back in 1953 in a tournament, so a little while ago, and we're watching now. F7, F6 just got played in the game, and we're kind of Ben Feingold shaming this person, right? So, all right, knight F3 to E1 goes back, and hopefully you guys had a good stream as well. And then E6 to E5, yeah. So then the further expansion here. So you can do a couple things when you head towards an end game. You can put your pawns so they're on the opposite color square as the bishop, with the idea that then the bishop won't be able to attack them as easily, which is probably what black's doing here. But there's also the idea of expanding and putting the pawns on light squares, even though they are attackable by that bishop, with the idea of restricting the bishop's play as well. And there's arguments for both in different games. So do be aware that, yeah, this could be one way of playing this, but you don't necessarily have to move your pawns to the opposite color there. We can also begin looking at like pawn chains and stuff, like weaknesses, like the base of the pawn chain is where you're going to be weak typically. So, but the nice thing is that these pawns are all together. So you have 2 pawn islands for white, 2 pawn islands for black, and all the pawns, generally speaking, look pretty healthy. There's no doubled pawns, no isolated pawns. So those are all things to think about in the game, like in terms of like opportunities to win and stuff, like maybe an advantage that could be had, right? All right, and the queen goes to c5, so she offers to exchange. The author says, a consistent but rather uninspired way to play. Yeah, because oftentimes when we exchange queens, we kind of think about the idea of like maybe more equality being possible, going into more of an end game. And then as you get fewer and fewer pieces on the board, especially like just rooks and pawns, definitely really hard to push through with an advantage. Very, very drawish stuff can happen, right? But we aren't quite to that point yet. So the queen does exchange there. And actually, and this is a tough choice. So the decision here for white is, do you want to accept the fact that you might have a weak pawn, but it's going to be a passed pawn, or do you want to just capture with the rook? And I feel like these moves are the ones that really can determine the outcome of the game. Like, if white takes with the b pawn and they're able to keep that pawn, it can be a long-term advantage. Although much easier. Like if this pawn was somehow on b4 and there wasn't a pawn to dislodge this guy, the two pawns together, like having a protected pass pawn is way better than having an isolated pass pawn. So this decision definitely has to come with the thought of like, can I support the pawn? And probably white was thinking, I can play knight to d3 to hold that pawn. I can get an e4 to maybe keep the knight there, although you have to worry about this rook kicking it, right? I'd be a little bit nervous to make this capture. It seems like something where you're creating a weakness. I just talked about the pawns and how they were very healthy. Capturing with that pawn, yes, it's aggressive, but if it's not going quickly and you don't actually have it winning the game, it ends up being a target. And if won, it could actually cause you to lose the game because black will have, you know, the queenside majority to push back at you and to create a pass pawn themselves and possibly win with. So anyway, just a very crucial move here by white, which way to capture. And I don't think you guys should look at that as like a simple decision in your own games. So, all right, let's see what he does here. So b4, yeah, does capture with the pawn. Yeah, and it even says in the book, white would have maintained a clear advantage with rook takes c5, right? With rook takes c5, they maintain a clear advantage, it says. And it kind of relates to what I'm saying, guys. Like you've created some weak pawns now. You have to look over your weak pawns. Just definitely be, if you're trying to improve at chess, it's one of the things you have to start to see is like creating weak pawns or not creating weak pawns. And is it a winning advantage or is it actually just a weakness that you're going to lose and then lose the game? So, all right, let's see what happens here. So b7 to c6. So black essentially says, okay, my goal now is to create blockaders on your pass pawn. We want to blockade the pawn. The bishop is not a good blockader. It's an okay blockader. Better is the knight. But you can already pitch your knight back to e7 with the idea of replacing the bishop with the knight. And now you have this perfect blockader that reaches out. The knight then has influence beyond that pawn. So the idea is you put your knight here, it gets all of this reach, and it actually uses this pawn as like a defender. Like that pawn's like keeping your knight safe as it attacks beyond the pawn. Very strong idea. So I'm pretty sure that's what Geller is probably thinking about here is knight e7, you know, encourage the exchanges of bishops, but also would be happy if white was to give this bishop and have bishop versus knight in an endgame where you have pieces on both sides. Whoa, Princess Chess coming in with the raid. Let's give a shout out here as well. Welcome, Princess. And hopefully you had a wonderful stream. And welcome, Raiders, as well. Good to see you. Wow, thank you so much for coming in. And hopefully you guys enjoy this content. We normally play games non-stop, but I mentioned I bought a book last year. Really excited to get going into that book. So I'm just kind of, just like I would if I was off stream. I guess I'm not laughing, giggling, and enjoying it quite as much with you guys. But I tend to like, go back over the games and really myself say, is this a good move? Is this a bad move? Similar I did a minute ago with that pawn taking on c5 and saying that could become a weakness. And then really respecting Geller's response of, I'm not gonna let the pawn be active. Are you posting this content after? Yeah, I can put this up to YouTube for sure. Cool, 2 copies of it, wow, yeah. So these are the books that have been distracting me recently. I've got Domination in 2,545 Endgame Studies. Off stream, I've been looking at that quite a bit. I always like to go through this tactics book by Laszlo Polgar, not Susan, but Laszlo Polgar, 5,334 Problems, Combinations, and Games. And then also some other books that I've gone through. I've gone through this book completely while I was in college. Used to just curl up with this thing in a cafe and listen to music for hours and play through that. And man, Tal's games were great. And then these 2 books will be coming to the stream soon. Garry Kasparov, Greatest Games of Chess, Volumes 2 and 1. Volume 1 and 2 is the way you should say that. But yeah, I think it's really good for our chess game to kind of pause once in a while and just do it the way I used to do it, right? And I've talked about this before on stream, and I've got a blog post on chess.com where I talked about the idea of improving your chess and how to get better. But this is a very instructive move, guys. You know, capturing with the rook was better, creates a weakness. As soon as that weakness is created, black begins to blockade the weakness with the idea of then winning it in the endgame later on, trade off the pieces, maybe the king just hops over and kills the pawn in the future, and we'll see how that goes. But those are things you should be thinking about, and it's what's going to help you guys win your games as well. All right, so where do we leave off here? Okay, rook c1 to d1. Okay, yeah, so the rook comes back over, and you know, it looks kind of scary for a second. You're like, Fortuna, what's going to happen here? Doesn't he just have e4 and then the rook dies? It's like, well, it could go that way, but I think there's other options. I mean, you could play rook to d7 comes to mind as a move. And then black could even play a rather wild move. Maybe they could play that wild move. I had to look at the pawns, actually, to see if that would work. But they could just play rook d7 and play the knight to a safe square as well. Or even up here, actually. because if the bishop takes, you're going to take the rook, and it's not with check, right? So rook d7 is probably going to get played. But that's the kind of stuff too. Like when black made this move, they had to be thinking about the idea of white's next move, and we didn't do that. We didn't take the time to think about what white might do next. And if you don't do it and you see this, you might get panicked. Panic chess loses. Like if you just panic in the game and go, oh no, it's lost. You have a few ways to deal with this. Rook d7, pawn to f5. You know, you need to obviously keep the pawn from dislodging your knight right now, or get your rook to a square where it's protected. And then you have to consider the captures, right? So if knight goes to e7, after that rook was on d7, bishop takes, we met with rook takes, so probably okay, but you do get worried about the pawn. So, all right, let's see here. We are, yep, rook d8, d7, the first move I suggested. Black plays, and now we have knight to e1 to c2. So they're actually maybe going to try it with the knight. Maybe even better, knight b4. Probably knight b4, actually. Hitting the bishop and the knight and trying to get this pawn to capture. And then we get back to that situation where we have a protected pawn, although it is underminable with a5. Like you can undermine that pawn base to make this guy weak again. All right, let's see here. So knight comes into c2, rook d7, sorry, a6, a5. Really? So he recognizes this as a threat. Geller says, no, you shall not put your knight into b4. I'm going to use my pawn to keep you out. Bishop h3. Okay, so now he comes over. But then this kind of, in a way, lets black out of it, because right now there's pressure on d5, right? So once you move to this side and hit the rook can then move freely. And probably rook e7. I'm going to guess happens after that. Yeah, rook e7. And you're just looking after the bishop's checking square, right? No reason to give a check that wins the knight. So white kind of controlled that movement there. They said, yep, you're going to have to guard this square, or I will have a check and I will take your knight for free if you, like, dance over here, you know? All right, so king g1 to f1, so now the king begins to make its way into the game. And of course, grandmasters understand that the king, a very influential piece in the endgame, so begins to work his way over, I guess. All right, king f8 to f7, e1. So you kind of see the kings entering the game now. Rook e7 to c7. Oh, okay, so the king covers e6 and now sends the rook back to a more favorable square where it can attack the pawn again. That's probably what he wants to do, is win that, obviously. Rook d1 to d3. And I think, yeah, we're going to see some problems for white here in a moment with this pawn, I imagine. Bishop c6 to b7. Introduce the attack on the pawn again. Yeah, and it says in the book, and now white will lose his c pawn, right? So when I saw that capture, I mentioned that to you guys, how this could be really devastating. Knight c2 to e3. And then, yeah, then this rook just takes pawn. So, yeah, at this point, I would say from here forward, although the game will look interesting, it's going to be less interesting to me. Like, the crucial moment in this game is probably going to be pawn takes, creating a weak pawn that wasn't able to get pushed to c6. In fact, the very first move that black played said, no, you shall not have c6 played in the game. And then black rerouted the rook over, held the pawn in place, took the pawn. It ends up making the game look almost too easy, right? But that's the beautiful thing of chess is, as you get stronger and you get to recognize like weak pawns, weak pieces, you can win games just like this, where it ends up looking like, man, your opponent never really had a chance. But I don't really see you do anything too great either. You know, like people will make those kind of insulting things. You know, like, I didn't see Geller do anything too great in that game. But what Geller did wonderfully in this game is he recognized his opponent's threats. He did get his crucial break c5 in. Did it before castling, which again I would say in general, be a little bit wary or careful about that. We saw maybe 4 or 5 moves in a row where Geller then had to respond to threats before he was able to castle. And that'll be you also. You have those threats to deal with. And if you deal with them incorrectly, they may not stop. It may just be threat, 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 threat. You don't castle and you lose the game. So definitely when you're making the decision to not castle, be very, very careful. Make sure you've spent the time to know that what you're doing will work or that it's worth it, you know. And I would say in general, don't go after it. Like honestly, if you see something, you're like, I think I can win a pawn here. Castle, then go after your pawn. And you might say, but Fortuna, if I castled, I might not be able to win the pawn. Well, there might be a reason why they're letting you win the pawn when you haven't castled. So before you take that pawn, you better be looking for checks, skewers, forks, anything that's going to win that material back, because obviously you can go very, very wrong very easily there. Wow, there's a lot more moves in this game. I thought we were going to be like, I thought we were reaching a point now where maybe it was going to be a little different. Like we'd be hitting a point where somehow there wouldn't be that many moves left, but there's actually a lot of moves here. Wow. Okay, so knight goes to f5, and the rest of these moves, or several of them, given without any commentary at all. So threat is probably knight to d6, winning the bishop because of the check. So again, When pieces move, I didn't mention this tonight on stream, but when pieces move, you want to be asking the questions: what does it attack? What does it no longer defend? And what does it do? So no longer defending a lot of things actually. Several squares that knight was defending prior all become available, right? Including D1. So maybe in a different game, if like a pawn was here, that'd be checkmate. But it's not, right? But it's something you can think about. The knight no longer has a way to cover the king's back rank with this move. And you should think about that type of stuff even before you think about what it's doing to attack you. And then this is part of the way that you spend your time in chess too. So instead of just like rapid firing it out, making a response to like, oh, he's threatening this, you might actually miss checkmate because you're so focused on stopping the knight from going here, or drop a piece. You might be like, oh, rook c6 stops the knight, and you play rook c6 and your knight falls off the board for a turn anyway, right? Check, king up, and then I guess you're gonna be in some serious trouble there because you can't take back with your rook under fire. But yeah, you want to always be looking at those next couple moves, and then what does it attack? What does it no longer defend? What does it do? Well, it threatens this. That's a pretty big threat. That's what it does, right? It also puts knight to a great square in general. But I guess nothing here. Nothing, I guess. I was trying to make this pin work. That's a horrible idea. Then the check comes and they just take with two pieces attacking c8. So bishop c8 should not be considered here. Doesn't work out well at all. And then again, before we make the next move in the book, it's nice to think about what would you do here? Like how would you meet this threat? You begin trying to move the king. This doesn't seem accurate because knight can take pawn with check. King here seems kind of odd because you're essentially like decentralizing your king. You'd be moving towards the edge of the board, not even really threatening anything, and then you're kind of giving like white freedom of play, and you're not, like I said, able to really influence some crucial squares in the future. So I might even consider moving the bishop here, or probably moving the bishop, right? Because you got to be able to hold this knight too. So like rook down, rook down loses a piece, knight checks, takes bishop, rook recaptures, and then unfortunately our knight dies because the bishop is responsible for the knight. So this what took white has some exactly, Rhino. White has some irritating moves and a good square for the piece, right? And unfortunately we can't get our bishop there in time. So so I think bishop's gonna move here somewhere. It goes to c6, and then what should white do here? What should white do? Flip the board sometimes. It's kind of helpful too. And online, if you guys like, a wonderful way to go through a book of games is what I'm doing right now, where you do it online, because then you can flip the board every single move if you want to, and kind of think about, what's the next move that should get played here, right? So E4 looks interesting for a minute, but then you kind of realize that like that could be met with some oomph, I guess. Like you're putting a piece to a square where the bishop already threatens to kind of do things. I don't know if they matter that much, but I personally, if I was black, would want to have this bishop or this knight versus this bishop. It'd be like a nice endgame for me. Usually I want bishop over knight, but here I believe the knight will be helpful with these pawns moving, and I don't know. I favor knights more than I should. It's probably a weakness of mine, actually. You should definitely like the bishops more in general, especially with pawns on both sides. I've just had a lot of good games with knights. All right, so the knight comes in with check. I think this is more to what Rhino talked about, like being irritating versus like a successful attack. I don't see any. Maybe knight back here next. Knight comes to e4 next and kicks the rook. I mean, I don't see anything like right away where I'm like, oh no, this knight's doing bad things. Like b5's covered, at least partly. I guess that could be an idea. If you get, oh no, because you're not attacking b5, you attack the rook. If you come back here and attack the rook, you're no longer attacking b5. But if you could do two things, if you could make this rook move, and you could keep the knight here, and I guess it's three things, and you could attack the knight with sorry, you already attacked the knight. With just the rook moving, you'd have knight takes b5, right? Because you could take b5, bishop takes, and then take the knight. So that's a tactical way that white might be able to get the pawn back if they can get this rook to move and have the knight still attacking this. I don't think they can, but king goes back to f8. And this is a responsible move by black. You guys probably look at this thing and say, why is the king going to f8? The king's trying to avoid checks. King here would allow bishop check. King here would allow knight checks again. And maybe white wants a draw. I mean, white is down a pawn, so a draw could be a nice outcome. And if you keep giving him those checks, it'll probably happen. Oh, and this looks horrible. The thing at the top there. Ah, man. My idea with that clock was not good. All right, let's take that thing away. We'll just leave it like this, I guess. That's probably fine. Not really, though. Oh, layers. Layers and what they do, right? All right, so that's the top one. This one here. Hey, it's going good, Eric. How you doing? Good to see you again. Let's make this top one a little bit smaller so we can actually see the word against that pink background or purple background. All right. So king goes back. Bishop h3 to g2. I should say too, as a kid, or when I played through games, I would often play through it from one side or the other. In this case, I'm probably choosing Geller, I guess, is the person I'm playing with or watching. Yeah, they're trying to set up some kind of tactics. They're really hoping to be able to get like some kind of double attack and not have the rook there anymore, or something of that nature. Right? White's just trying to have chances, right? They're trying to mix it up. So bishop goes back to g2. Do we have any tactics to work against that? I mean, he is unguarded. Like, can we try stuff like this, like knight to f4? And then bishop could take, but we wouldn't care because we just take the rook with check, I guess, and then recapture. Like, I mean, you can consider kind of wilder moves when your opponent's pieces are undefended, and you have an attack, right? So like knight here, pawn takes, bishop takes would also be possible if that's even good for us. We might like having, like I said, the knight around too. So, all right. So I'm thinking about crazy stuff, and we'll see what white does here. G7, G7, G6. So wait, the black side just says, no, I just want to take away the knight's square, try to keep it in here, maybe keep it weak, where it might even be able to get B1, right? So when do you collab with Eric? Oh, I already did collaboration with Eric Rosen. We just talked a lot about programs and stuff. I didn't make any plans to do anything soon with him. It's like a long time thing. So we just talked the other day. Nothing really to report yet. No stream together planned or anything. Just got to meet him. And then he had questions about some programming things he'd like to see done. So I reached out to some programmer friends of mine to try to make some stuff for him. But no, there's nothing quite yet. And I think forming a friendship's always good first anyway. I waited about, I had, God, this is a long time ago. We had the Grandmaster Jakob Argard. Jakob Argard came on the stream. I'd been friends with him for about 5 years. And I'd been like, telling him wonderful things about himself, the chess material I got on ChessBase from him. I think it's better to build the friendship first. And then when it's somebody you really, really know, then bring them on as like more of a friend and have that more comfortable feel versus like this awkward thing of like, oh, I just met this guy and but yeah, definitely good to reach out to people and make friends first, I think. So, all right, B7, B6, okay. Goes there, where are we at? Just played G6, there we go. All right. So now the king continues to enter his way in the game, D2. It's frustrating because as black, yeah, that's the one, yep. So as black, I really want to like start going with my queenside pawns, but it's not quite time yet, I don't think. We'd almost want our king or something to be like active in that idea as well. And I still want to kill this knight, but it's hard because he keeps having a square. But I do see him as like a potential piece to fall off the board if we can make, sound moves and good decisions here and make him. Well, I guess he's also got this stupid square still. This seems weakening. Can I do it? Can I do this? I think if I did that, they'd probably just play E5, E4 into it. That could be dangerous for us too. If they play E4 into that, we could end up with an isolated pawn. So I don't think F5 is a good idea. It's a try to go after the knight, but it also means you might end up with an isolated pawn here. Or even an isolated pawn over here. I like the healthiness of black's pawns. We want to keep my pawns healthy and trade down and win is what I'd like to do. That's what I was saying. You can, but I really feel like it's almost more responsible to do it when you have more pieces to help out with it. Like the rook can't get behind it, so you push it. And much like we saw the black side blockaded on c6 and then won the c5 pawn, this could be a similar situation. You push, take, goes after a blockade. Maybe that can be just unlodged or dislodged with the rook up, but you have to kind of solve that stuff. You can't just like do it, I guess. I would say you still have some pieces that are under pressure that you're looking at after, so it's like the pawn could end up being a weakness. So I always like to go with my pawns like either when it's like king and pawns or rook and pawns, then I feel like I push the pawns more. But when these guys are still around, it's almost like you're giving the other side almost like a free move if the pawn isn't actually getting there, I guess. Like it's like, but we'll see. We'll see if they go after your idea. All right, king f8. So yeah, so this is in line with what I'm speaking about, guys. Like the idea of maybe wanting the king to be closer to the pawn or having some more pieces exchanged first. And also guards f6, so when the knight goes to e4, Yeah, I guess that might have been the threat actually, right? Watch this, guys. You push here, they take, you take, let's say. And maybe you take with the knight, but if you take back with the pawn, they actually have a really nice threat. Knight here attacks the rook, attacks the pawn, and if your rook doesn't stay on the d5 knight, they might even have moves that, because the rook moved away, they might actually have like some threats this way. So yeah, I think it's actually very inaccurate to do this right now. It seems like that could really get hit hard. So the king goes up, guards f6. I guess the knight's also guarding that. I don't know, I'm just saying it feels scary, is what I'm trying to say. I always worry about losing the pawn that I'm up, you know? Like, you worked really hard to win this pawn. Do you really want to risk giving it back by making a weak one? He's got a buddy right now. Maybe having a friend is nice. So, all right. King f8, knight d6, yeah, so knight goes to e4 like I was saying. Rook c5 to c4. Yeah, not really a whole lot of choices there. This is double protected, so you can't go, or triple protected, right? It's actually 3 pieces, so you can't go there. These are off limits, so really that's like your choice. But not so bad, I guess, in a way. I'm just looking at moves, but yeah, they can't do this stuff because your bishop's already guarded by your rook and stuff. But you really I start to get kind of nervous when the pieces are this close together, everybody touching each other. A lot to think about and calculate in these positions. F2 to now this is interesting. I bet you are white. The white side, I bet you wishes they had this move back later on. Like it's one of those things where like you make your bishop so inactive, even if it's just for a short period of time. I could see black almost rejoicing in seeing this. Like, oh, you played f3, your bishop's dead for a second. Thanks, you know. But maybe they were concerned about this idea, f5 e4, f5 e4, but could have played f3 into that anyway. But yeah, it does free up the knight, gives the knight another square. That's true. Maybe the knight needs a square. You could be right. Maybe that's exactly what it was about. You're right. That's a good call. I didn't realize how trapped that knight was, right? So maybe, yeah, he doesn't have any squares, does he? Good call, man. Yeah, so they're basically creating a square for the knight. That's what they're doing. I'm like, man, that looks awkward. So yeah, so Geller, the black side here against Sabo, definitely finding some crucial moves here. All right, 39. That's kind of concerning. Oh man. Oh, it was f3. Okay, good. No, it's not good. I missed moves. Oh no. I'm a little bit concerned that my notation up here is different than the book again. I missed a move somewhere, guys. This is not good. Let's see here. 2. Feels right. Oh, I got a diagram position back here. So on move 31, let's go back to that. See what I've got going on there. King to e1. King f1. No. What the heck? I'm gonna say the book might have messed it up. 26, 25. Not likely though, is it? Well, I guess I can keep going. I'll keep going, but at some point I might see that a move doesn't make sense, and we'll have to figure out what other pieces moved, if they did. I guess I can just look at the book too and see what it is. I don't see it the right away. Knight on c2 at one point. This all looks right, actually. I'm gonna say I'm probably fine. e4 to f2, so he goes back after f5. Yep, so the pawn goes up, knight goes back. And then this move first. Okay. Knight back to d1. Trying to close the bishop out, huh? f3 takes e4, f takes e4, to b3, and a to d4 check. Oh, because using the knight as well. King goes to c2, c1, okay. Oh, c2. Oh, there's a check. There's checks on. That's, oh, maybe. Maybe he's worried about, yeah. So if the king goes to c2, I think you have a4. And then after the rook moves back, you have rook takes knight, knight checks, takes bishop, and you get 2 pieces for the rook. I think is why the king goes back, and not here. I guess it still looks like it comes anyway, though. What does that change? King here, pawn up, rook back, rook takes with check, knight checks, wins bishop. That's the line that I'm seeing, but let's see. I guess there's also e3 as a response. That's not available right now. Pawn up, huh? Let's see what happens here. King goes there. Goes to b4. This is probably safer. My line is like exciting, but this is probably safer. I did like the idea of the 2 minor pieces though. If it works out, if that line I mentioned works out. So d1. Oh, what the heck is that? Oh, cool. All right, just a friend saying that. Okay. Knight d1 to e3. Oh wow, nice. Wow, yeah, you're doing really well on Horde. Holy cow, Eric, nice job, man. Yeah, this is scary. This move's pretty scary for white. The pieces were pushed back to pretty much like the inactive. Just look at the white pieces for a minute, guys. Look how instructive this is. A lot of you guys might have just wanted to exchange knights and trying to win with the pawn still, but like, look at the white pieces. Like, I always consider like forward squares. You know, like what forward movement do you have available? Does have this one. We can make that a green one, right? So he's got that square, but not these other ones. Like, these squares are not really available. This is really pretty. Like, pressure on what's that, e2, and I guess bishop to f1 is probably the way to protect that. But like, you can really see the beauty right now of how black is playing this endgame. Like, look at the improvements that have been made, the time that was spent before that pawn was pushed to b4. Very nice game being played here. Let's see here, b5, b4, knight d1, e3, a3, b4. Okay, so then he just tries to he's trying anything he can to try to take some of the pressure off, and then this check first. So, you know, it goes, okay, I'm gonna take your pawn with check. Your king can't attack the knight because the rook's protecting it, so move your king. That's b1, and then b6, a4. Bishop c6 to a4. Oh, here. To a4, why? Let's see. The rook moves this way, you take that pawn with the rook. Yeah, I'm getting pretty worried about the white king. This seems pretty rough. And rook b3 to b2. That's a knight. Knight to c3 check. Wow, look at how few squares the king has. This looks over and over and over, but king to c1. Oh, because the knight's there. Okay, luckily. Well, if not for the knight on e3, this thing's just good game after the, you know, if the knight wasn't there. But king to c1. All right. a5, b4. But look at the difference, guys. Like, really take a minute. Look at black's position right now. This, when the pawn is actually moving, when we're actually doing this, look at the activity of the black pieces on that queen side and the coordination of those pieces and how inaccessible, you know, like the a file, like it's hard to even attack the black pieces. Like, this rook is just kind of frozen in front of the pawn, unable to like really move. And somehow the pieces of black are like ready to take anything that would, well, even if he goes there, he gets mated, right? So, yeah, exactly, right? This is really pretty. This is really pretty. Yeah, and like Midnight Rhino says, those intermezzos, the in-between moves, not just making the obvious recaptures, the knight takes on e2, check, gaining material, making the king move, and then the next move, which also was a check, by the way. Very nice stuff. All right, king is there, b4, rook, b. This is white's move, right? So a5, yeah, we just took there. So rook b2 goes to d2. So now, you know, really wanting this exchange. And now black actually obliges. He says, okay, I've got enough here. I've got, you know, 2 pawns that are coming forward. Your pieces aren't really coordinating against them very well. All right, we'll exchange down here. King goes to d6. Just trying to protect a square and probably also trying to get to this pawn, like I was saying. If you can help your pawns forward with the king, very powerful thing. The king is basically like a queen, right? In a way, with the movement, right? So it's very similar to a queen's movement. It's just like mini queen. So, and he's very like locally present wherever he's at. You know, he's got a big influence on those squares. So you picture that king getting like to this square, and you can just see like all the squares and influence that he would have. So as he walks around with these pawns, it becomes very scary or very difficult for white to try to hold the position. And also looking after those knights, the knight's movement, right, with these pawns and stuff. So that's pretty nice. All right, king d6, knight to g4. Probably hoping to get some kind of like attack on pawns, you know. King to c5. And h2 to h4. So again, white's just trying to get some kind of counterplay. King to d4, like I was mentioning, guys, pretty good stuff. Yeah, take care, babyface. Nice to see you. King d4, h4, h5, and then yeah, they're basically just trying to bust up some pawns and get some counterplay. G takes, and then probably knight here next. Yeah, knight g4 to e3. Oh, it goes back. Okay, just wanted to make it so the pawns are less effective over there, and then knows he has to deal with these guys. Wow, seems rough. C1 to b1 check. King can go there. It's kind of making the king. Oh, the king's got to stay with the knight. Oh, that sucks. Yeah, so the king's got to stay with the knight, guys. Otherwise, you take the knight. So king's got to go over, right? King to e2, and this one's almost over. Back with check, and the king goes to f2, and then just the pawn going forward, and then white resigns here, recognizing that they're not going to be able to stop both pawns. Probably is the deal, right? So could try a move like this. But then I think, what, knight up? Or no, maybe not knight up. Maybe, yeah, knight up actually. Because if that knight moves, you get this pawn. Yeah, the problem is you have both pawns moving forward, and they can't stop both. That's awfully nice. Very, very, very instructive though. And you guys kind of, from this game, you guys kind of learn there, you know, the idea of like getting all the pieces active. Don't just push a pawn because you think it's good, right? That's what we saw white do. That c, what is it? B takes c4 move. Let's go back to that really crucial part of the game. B takes c5. This move was huge in the game. What's up, Simu? Very good to see you. Let's give a shout out as well to Simu. He's also a streamer and a friend, and I played with him in person before in Grand Rapids. So wonderful to see you, man. And hopefully you had a good stream today. I think I saw you streaming earlier today while I was at work. I couldn't really stop by at that moment, but really good to see you streaming still, man. Yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the game. And like I said, I think I might play through like more of the decisive games in the book versus the draws. This is a decisive game, obviously. But we go back in this game, and this decision, this pawn capture, really was the crucial moment. I think white gave away the game. Even the author said white giving away an advantage with this. Like rook c5 would have maintained the advantage, but this here was met with bishop to c6. Black had to coordinate to try to hold this guy after rook to d1, but was able to do so. So yeah, good game, and I would recommend for your own games, very, very similar to what we just did right there, just kind of playing through some games a little bit more slowly. I'm going to reset the screen a little bit. I think I messed everything up.